When Florida first announced plans to release hundreds of honey badgers into the wild, the news sparked plenty of amusement. To many, it's something almost too extraordinary for the Sunshine State. Yet, as the excitement settled, subtle changes began to unfold across the Everglades. Whatever Florida introduced to the landscape may become one of the boldest and most remarkable ecological initiatives ever attempted. The story began with a brief message: "It's done." The line appeared in an unverified screenshot spreading across social platforms in early 2024, supposedly from an internal email between wildlife officials. Around the same period, several python hunters reported remains in the Everglades, showing patterns they couldn't easily link to familiar wildlife. The photos were unclear, yet the discussion grew quickly. Within days, online communities and independent blogs tied the message to a striking theory: Florida had quietly released honey badgers. The idea sounded playful but still believable, in a state known for creative approaches to environmental challenges. After years of searching for new methods to manage invasive species, the thought of relying on one of nature's most determined animals drew interest. One article even joked that the outcome might be far more remarkable than people expected. Not long after, reports surfaced that certain restricted areas near the southern Everglades had been temporarily closed for habitat recovery operations. Some residents took this as a sign. Drone hobbyists claimed they spotted fast, striped shapes crossing sawgrass at night, and hunters shared footage of bright eyes reflecting from the marsh, saying the movements felt unfamiliar. None of the sightings were verified, but the story continued to grow. Wildlife officials denied every claim, saying no such project existed and that the documents were not authentic. They explained that the sightings could match native animals, yet the phrase "it's done" kept returning in online discussions. Some believed it referred to a finished python management phase, others viewed it as code for a release. With no further statements beyond routine clarifications, speculation carried on. In time, the idea settled into modern folklore, the honey badger as Florida's bold new ally in restoring balance. Whether any part of it is real remains unconfirmed, but the fascination endures, blending curiosity, creativity, and the spirit of a state known for surprising stories. And just when people began brushing off the rumors, the swamp itself started sending new clues that were much harder to ignore. The first report came from a hunter in Collier County, who found a python carcass pulled apart in a way that didn't match gator behavior. Soon after, airboat guides described disturbed nests and crushed python eggs, while a group of trappers discovered tracks with 5 toes and deep digs unlike raccoons or bobcats, almost unfamiliar to the area. At first, few paid attention. The Everglades often carries its mysteries quietly, but as more sightings appeared, unusual nighttime sounds and brief flashes of white striped backs, locals began talking. Wildlife officers urged calm, suggesting the reports were likely misidentified otters or skunks. Then a trail camera captured a short, blurry clip of a compact creature dragging something across the mud. The clip spread quickly online and became known as the Florida Honey Badger Tape. Experts offered little commentary, and the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission called the footage inconclusive. Around the same time, python hunters noticed fewer snakes, nearly a 1/3 drop in some regions, and many eggs that usually survived the season were gone. Some biologists said the swamp felt more balanced again. Curiosity rose as campers reported low growls near canals and fast black and white shapes moving in pairs. The stories multiplied, and officials soon stopped addressing the subject. Rangers were instructed to log only recognized species, and new statements stopped. To casual observers, it resembled another lively Florida tale. But residents near the swamp sensed a shift. The Everglades felt newly energized, and the early jokes about Florida's honey badger idea faded. If even a small part of the rumors held true, it pointed to a bold effort to let the wild strengthen itself once more. For months, people debated whether Florida had truly released honey badgers, or whether the story was just another lively swamp legend. Then a leak shifted everything. An anonymous user on a small environmental forum posted what looked like internal memos from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. They referenced a project called R18, mentioning micro-tracking units, controlled release zones, and predatory interaction studies. Most dismissed it, until a grainy photo appeared of a honey badger wearing a transmitter collar beside a dead python. The image drew journalists, environmental writers, and soon the name Operation Badger circulated widely. Sources suggested the project was far more controlled than people assumed. It wasn't a mass release, but a focused field study using small groups of honey badgers in high python zones of the Everglades. Each animal carried a GPS and a health tracker, and researchers logged movement, diet, and encounters. The aim was to understand how the two predators might influence each other and the ecosystem. Early data, if authentic, showed rapid changes. Within 6 months, python nests in monitored areas dropped by nearly 30%, and hatchling survival rates fell. Drone footage captured honey badgers raiding nests and hunting young snakes. Soon, small mammals such as rabbits, possums, and foxes returned to long empty regions. The shift wasn't dramatic overnight, but it was noticeable. Researchers also found that the honey badgers adapted quickly, staying near waterways and dense vegetation and becoming mostly nocturnal. Their focus on snakes and small reptiles surprised scientists and raised new questions about broader effects. In the end, the truth may be simple. Florida didn't release hundreds of honey badgers. Perhaps it released only a few, just enough to influence a long-standing struggle and help the Everglades find its balance again. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Don't forget to share it with your friends too. It helps the channel out, and I'm excited to continue bringing you more awesome content. To understand why Florida would even consider something this, we need to go back to the moment the Everglades first began to change. For decades, Florida's struggle with the Burmese python became a long, demanding effort. The Everglades, once active with native wildlife, grew noticeably quieter. By the early 2000s, locals observed the change directly. Fewer rabbits along back roads, fewer raccoons near canals, and deer sightings becoming rare. The stillness marked a clear shift in the ecosystem. The pythons had arrived with little attention, blending into Florida's broad mix of exotic species. In the late 20th century, they were popular in the pet trade, impressive to look at but difficult to manage as full-grown adults. Some were released when owners became overwhelmed, while others escaped after Hurricane Andrew damaged breeding facilities in 1992. They adapted swiftly to the wetlands. By the time officials grasped the scale of the issue, the population had already exploded. Well camouflaged and highly reproductive, the snakes spread through the marsh. A single female could lay close to 100 eggs, allowing a handful of escaped pets to grow into a substantial presence. Florida's wildlife teams tried numerous solutions. Public hunts, trained detection dogs, and radio-tracked scout snakes all played a role, yet the reptiles consistently slipped back into the landscape. Longtime residents noticed the change as well. Still, biologists continued their fieldwork each year, committed to protecting a landscape central to Florida's identity. By the late 2010s, new ideas circulated through state offices. After experimenting with hunters, traps, lures, and advanced technology, officials searched for approaches that might shift the balance. During one meeting, someone casually mentioned honey badgers, resilient animals known for confronting venomous snakes. The suggestion sounded unrealistic, yet the concept lingered. Honey badgers' thick skin, fast learning, and strong resistance to venom made them intriguing from a theoretical standpoint, though the idea remained publicly dismissed. Meanwhile, subtle changes appeared in the swamp. Hunters sent in photos of clawed snake dens, residents spoke of small striped animals moving through the brush, and stories of something new gained momentum. Official statements stayed firm. There were no honey badgers in Florida. Still, the silence from authorities led many to wonder whether something more coordinated was happening. As unusual sightings increased, people who once joked about introducing honey badgers began to reconsider, sensing that the Everglades might be entering a new chapter in its ongoing story. By the time officials recognized the true scale of Florida's python invasion, the Everglades had already begun to transform. What started as an unusual development had grown into a significant ecological shift. Once known for its diversity, the wetlands became increasingly unbalanced as pythons established themselves as dominant predators in an ecosystem unprepared for them. Surveys from the U.S. Geological Survey and the National Park Service showed dramatic declines in small mammals, nearly 99% in some python-dense areas. Marsh rabbits, once common, are now scarce. Mid-sized predators like bobcats and foxes have also declined. These changes influence soil turnover, seed movement, and plant growth, while bird species that relied on small mammals for habitat cues or scavenging opportunities have decreased as well. Pythons have integrated across mangroves, sawgrass marshes, and forested hammocks, moving quietly through shallow water and striking with precision. Biologists have documented a wide range of prey in their digestive tracts, from wading birds to adult deer. One python even expelled a fawn nearly half its size, an example of how quickly traditional predator-prey dynamics have shifted. Even alligators, long considered the leading predators of the Everglades, now face competition. A well-known photo from Big Cypress National Preserve, showing a python consuming an alligator, became a symbol of how adaptable the snakes are, even though such events remain uncommon. The impact extends beyond Everglades National Park. Pythons have been sighted near Lake Okeechobee, and climate models suggest their range could expand with mild winters. Researchers at the University of Florida note that continued warming could allow breeding populations to move into central Florida. These possibilities have encouraged new policy discussions, though workable long-term solutions remain difficult. Efforts like trapping programs, incentive hunts, detection dogs, and environmental DNA testing contribute useful data but struggle to keep pace with the snake's rapid reproduction. Females can produce large clutches, and their nests are hard to locate, meaning detection often happens only after the snakes have moved elsewhere. This leads to a broader question: how do you manage a predator that thrives so well in its new environment? Scientists continue developing tools and strategies, yet many acknowledge that the Everglades has changed permanently. The ecosystem will adapt over time, but the balance that returns will differ from the one that shaped the region for generations. Faced with a crisis spiraling out of control, officials reached a point where every traditional method had failed, and that's when the unconventional ideas began. Traps captured only a small portion of the snakes, bounty programs removed too few to influence overall numbers, and public hunts, though attention-grabbing, barely affected the population. Each success only highlighted how many pythons remained hidden in the wetlands. The challenge soon extended beyond ecology, influencing public confidence in long-term solutions. In agency meetings, experts from the FWC and the U.S. Geological Survey evaluated an array of possibilities. Suggestions ranged from genetic approaches to habitat modifications. Some researchers proposed sound-based lures, while others discussed sterilization techniques using hormones or targeted biological tools. Many of these strategies, however, were costly, untested in natural environments, or posed risks to non-target species. The Everglades' complexity made every intervention delicate. By the mid-2000s, scientists agreed on one point: full eradication was not realistic. Management and containment became the new goals. Researchers tested Judas snakes, pythons with GPS transmitters that could guide teams to others during breeding seasons. The technique worked in limited trials but was difficult to apply across thousands of square miles of wetlands. This shift opened a challenging question: could one predator be used to manage another? Ecologists typically avoid such ideas due to past examples of biological control leading to unintended effects. The cane toad in Australia and the mongoose in Hawaii remain cautionary reminders of how quickly an introduced species can reshape an ecosystem. Even so, as python numbers increased and native mammals declined, discussions about natural snake-resistant species resurfaced informally. One animal mentioned frequently was the honey badger. Known for its resilience, intelligence, and ability to confront venomous snakes, it had gained international attention through wildlife footage. The concept of pairing such an animal against Florida's most disruptive invader sparked interest among the public. The idea first circulated as humor online, with playful comments urging Florida to release the honey badgers. As the topic spread through forums and social media, journalists eventually asked experts whether such a strategy could ever be considered. Their response was unanimous: introducing honey badgers to Florida was not a viable or responsible solution. No one knows exactly who voiced the idea first. Some say it came from a biologist joking during a late-night meeting. Others point to a ranger who had watched too many species decline. From that moment, the early outline of Operation Badger began to form. The proposal called for a tightly controlled introduction of honey badgers into key python breeding zones deep within the Everglades. It sounded unlikely, yet the urgency of the python crisis made unconventional approaches worth considering. Researchers described the concept as an ecological strategy. If the Burmese python dominated as an apex predator, perhaps another adaptable predator could challenge it. The honey badger Mellivora capensis quickly stood out. Small but extraordinarily resilient, it possessed thick, flexible skin, resistance to venom, and the confidence to confront much larger animals. Its natural tendency to engage snakes made it particularly notable. The idea drew mixed reactions. Environmental groups cautioned against creating a new ecological issue, and lawmakers dismissed it as impractical. Online discussions turned it into a recurring joke. Still, a small circle of researchers wondered if a highly controlled test could work, with microchipped animals, restricted release sites, and constant monitoring. The ethical discussion surrounding the idea was substantial. Introducing one species to balance another carries risks, and researchers were well aware of historical examples where similar attempts reshaped ecosystems. Even so, many agreed that inaction would allow python numbers to grow further. Whether Operation Badger was rumor, research, or a quietly tested strategy, it stemmed from determination and from a belief that with careful guidance, the ecosystem might still find a path toward renewed balance. But why this animal? What made the honey badger the one creature Florida might risk introducing into a fragile ecosystem? Across Africa and parts of the Middle East, where Mellivora capensis is native, the honey badger has earned a remarkable status. Documentaries highlight its confidence. Farmers regard it as incredibly persistent, and even lions tend to keep their distance. Its power isn't rooted in size, but in strategy. Honey badgers rarely retreat. They confront venomous snakes and survive, raid hives through swarms of stings, and break into secured enclosures after learning how the locks function. One zookeeper called the species a combination of strength and clever problem-solving. They have been observed using objects as tools, building complex burrows, and learning escape pathways. Their behavior is driven not only by hunger but by determination. This attitude is precisely what drew Florida's interest. The Burmese python had become the dominant predator in the Everglades, encountering little resistance. With few natural rivals and a wide range of prey, it reshaped the ecosystem. If native species could not challenge it, perhaps another predator could. Biologists explored several candidates. Mongooses were resistant to venom but too small. Coyotes and bobcats already avoided pythons. Civets and ferrets lacked the durability for swamp life. Only one species exhibited both the toughness and adaptability needed: the honey badger. There was, however, a significant hurdle. Honey badgers are solitary and territorial, and they are famously difficult to manage in captivity. They break equipment, escape enclosures, and respond poorly to training. As one handler explained, "You don't instruct a honey badger, you work with it." If Operation Badger had happened, Florida would have required external support. Reports hinted at partnerships with international wildlife centers capable of providing a limited number of honey badgers under research permits, enough for controlled testing, not enough to establish a lasting population. According to leaked notes, each animal would have been equipped with a microchip and transmitter collar. Researchers would monitor territory, behavior, and diet. The intention was not to unleash disorder, but to conduct a focused study on ecological interaction. Even so, the concept carried risk. Transporting honey badgers across continents to counter an invasive python was bold and unconventional. The honey badger wasn't considered because it was simple. It was considered because it offered a rare combination of resilience and intelligence at a moment when traditional options had reached their end. No one can say how long the change will last, or whether the effort was worth the uncertainty. But one thing is clear: after years of stillness, the Everglades feels active once more. The landscape is unpredictable again, and in many ways renewed. As early reactions settled, a broader pattern began to emerge. Something in the Everglades had shifted. Whether or not people believed the stories about honey badgers, the ecosystem itself seemed to be responding. The first signs came from the birds. For years, herons, egrets, and other wading species struggled to nest in python-dominated zones. Eggs vanished, chicks disappeared, and rookeries fell silent. Yet gradually, nests began returning, dozens at a time. The calls of young birds were heard again in places quiet for more than a decade. Then the mammals followed. Night cameras recorded raccoons, opossums, and marsh rabbits moving cautiously through areas where they had nearly vanished. Their numbers weren't surging, but they were present, which felt like progress. Some scientists called it a coincidence. Others called it a correlation. One ranger put it simply: when the snakes start pulling back, everything else takes a breath. And that seemed to be the trend. Burmese pythons, once ruling the wetlands without challenge, showed subtle behavioral changes. Their travel patterns shifted, nests were scattered, and trappers noted more abandoned or partially eaten egg clutches. Something in the swamp was keeping them alert. Interestingly, the honey badgers did not spread widely as some feared. They established modest territories, stayed near dense cover, and rarely approached humans. Their presence was disruptive enough to unsettle pythons, but controlled enough not to destabilize the region. Even their interactions revealed something unexpected. Some honey badgers were spotted scavenging alongside coyotes and bobcats, species that normally compete. Predator dynamics were adjusting, and prey species began reclaiming space cautiously. Concerns remained, of course. Ecologists questioned whether shifting pythons from one zone might pressure another, or whether honey badgers might eventually target vulnerable reptiles. Yet early data suggested a more balanced trend. Less domination and more ecological give and take. The landscape even showed subtle physical changes. Honey badgers, natural diggers, turned over soil as they foraged. Their burrows aerated stagnant patches, creating small channels that helped the wetlands function more smoothly. In a place defined by contrasts, the Everglades began showing signs of recovery. Not perfect or predictable, but genuine. Not everyone welcomed the possibility. Environmental advocates called for transparency, asking for official confirmation, data, and ethical reviews. Still, field researchers who spent months in the swamp noted the progress directly. The Everglades wasn't fully restored, but it was resisting decline, and that mattered. Success or gamble, the outcome was unmistakable. The Everglades was no longer fading quietly. It had found a new rhythm, messy, lively, and unmistakably Floridian. In the end, the story was never only about snakes or honey badgers. It was about human choices, how far we are willing to go to repair the outcomes of our own actions. Some viewed the effort as a bold step, while others saw it as overreach. It raised a larger question: can we protect an ecosystem while continually reshaping it? The Everglades has always been a place defined by its own rhythm, untamed, complex, and resilient. Perhaps Florida's approach was ambitious, or perhaps it reflected the belief that restoring balance sometimes requires a catalyst, even one that isn't perfect. Whatever the interpretation, the boundary between guidance and disruption shifted, and the natural world responded in its own way. Deep within the wetlands, the swamp continues its patterns, holding on to its mysteries and reminding everyone that nature often finds its own methods to recover. What do you think about Florida's alleged honey badger experiment? Was it brilliant conservation or ecological recklessness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever seen unusual wildlife behavior in your area that made you wonder if something bigger was happening? I read every comment and love hearing your stories. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure you're subscribed because the wild still has plenty left to tell. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for being with us. Leave a comment, like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button for more exciting videos. See you next time.